It was one of those typical chaotic subway rides during rush hour, packed, noisy, and filled with people glued to their phones or staring blankly into space, just trying to survive the commute. I was lucky enough to snag a seat near the window, but even then, my knees were practically touching the person opposite me. The air smelled faintly of coffee and stale metal. Then it happened, the kind of moment that pulls your attention away from your phone whether you want to or not. A group of teenagers near the door was getting louder. You know the type, swaggering energy, sneakers scuffing the floor, voices pitched just a bit too high for public transport. One of them, a shaggy-haired kid in a red hoodie, suddenly pointed at a man sitting quietly by the window across from me. "Yo, check this guy out," the teenager said loudly, grinning at his friends. "Dude looks like he got lost on his way to Hollywood." His friends burst out laughing, the sound sharp and obnoxious. Curious, I followed their gaze, and that's when I saw him. Keanu Reeves. Yep, the Keanu Reeves. He was sitting there like any regular guy, wearing a plain hoodie, jeans, and a worn pair of sneakers. No entourage, no security, just a man on the subway. If you didn't look closely, you'd never guess he was one of the biggest movie stars in the world. Most people didn't seem to recognize him. But these teenagers? They were having a field day. "Hey, Mr. Matrix. What happened? Lost your fortune?" the red hoodie kid jeered, emboldened by his friend's laughter. "Or is this your new role? Subway guy, the movie?" People around us shifted uncomfortably. You could feel the tension building. A woman with a toddler glanced nervously at Keanu, probably wondering if he was going to snap back. But Keanu didn't flinch. He just kept staring out the window, completely unbothered. That only made the kid push harder. "Come on, man, don't ignore me," the teenager said, his voice dripping with mockery. "You're supposed to be a badass, right? Or did John Wick retire?" More laughter from his friends. I wanted to say something, tell the kid to knock it off, but I hesitated. You know how it is on public transport, nobody wants to get involved. People looked down at their laps, pretending not to hear. Even the grumpy old guy reading a newspaper next to me didn't say a word. And then the teenager crossed the line. "Bet you're washed up now, huh? Is that why you're riding the subway like the rest of us losers?" The words hung in the air, sharp and ugly. I saw a few people wince. Even the teenager's friends went quiet. Keanu finally moved. He turned his head slowly and looked straight at the kid. His face was calm, but there was a weight behind his gaze that made the air feel heavier. "You done?" he asked quietly. The teenager blinked, clearly not expecting a response. But he recovered quickly, plastering a smug grin on his face. "What? Just messing around, dude. Thought you movie stars could take a joke." Keanu tilted his head slightly, like he was genuinely curious. "You think being mean is the same as being funny?" The question hit harder than any insult could have. The subway car went dead silent. Even the screech of the train on the track seemed to fade into the background. The teenager opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His friends shifted uncomfortably, their bravado evaporating. Keanu held the kid's gaze for a moment longer, then leaned back against the seat, his expression unreadable. The tension in the car was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I thought that was the end of it. But then Keanu did something that stunned everyone. As the train approached the next station, he stood up and looked directly at the teenager. "Come with me," he said simply. The kid's friends gawked. "Dude, are you serious? Where are you going with him?" one of them whispered. The teenager looked torn. You could see it on his face, part of him wanted to stay and laugh it off with his friends, but another part was clearly intrigued. Keanu's calm confidence was impossible to ignore. Finally, with a shrug that was more bravado than actual confidence, the kid stood up. "Fine. Whatever, he muttered, shoving his hands into his pockets. As the subway doors slid open, Keanu stepped onto the platform with the teenager right behind him. The rest of us were left sitting there, stunned. I mean, seriously, where the heck was this going? The subway doors hissed shut behind them, and for a moment, the entire car remained in stunned silence. People exchanged glances, eyes wide with disbelief. Keanu Reeves just walked off a train with a mouthy teenager in tow. What in the world was going on? I was tempted to jump off and follow them, but the train was already moving. All I could do was sit there, replaying the bizarre scene in my head. Whatever was about to happen on that platform, it was going to be unforgettable. Meanwhile, on the bustling subway platform, the teenager shuffled awkwardly beside Keanu. The usual morning chaos swirled around them, commuters rushing past, announcements crackling over the intercom, but an odd silence hung between the two of them. So, where are we going? The teenager asked, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. Keanu kept walking, his steps calm and deliberate. You'll see. The kid huffed. Look, I only got off the train 'cause I was curious, okay? If this is some teach me a lesson thing, I'm not interested. Keanu glanced at him, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Is that what you think this is? The teenager shrugged. I dunno. Feels like one of those weird after-school specials my mom watches. Keanu didn't respond. He just kept walking, weaving through the crowd like he had a destination in mind. The teenager fidgeted, clearly growing more uncomfortable. Dude, seriously. You're not gonna, make me meditate on a mountaintop or some Hollywood guru stuff, right? Keanu chuckled softly. No mountaintops today. Just a little perspective. They reached the escalator, and Keanu motioned for the kid to step on first. As they ascended, the teenager's curiosity got the better of him. Alright, I'll bite. Why the subway? Don't you have some fancy car with tinted windows or a helicopter or whatever rich people use? Keanu's expression remained thoughtful. The subway gets me where I need to go. It's simple. Yeah, but you're Keanu Reeves. People recognize you, right? Doesn't that get annoying? Keanu shrugged. Sometimes. But not everyone is paying attention. Most people are too caught up in their own world. The teenager snorted. Guess that's why no one stood up for you back there. They were all too busy pretending they didn't hear me. Keanu's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Or maybe they were just waiting for me to handle it. The escalator deposited them onto a busy street. Horns blared, and the smell of street food mingled with exhaust fumes. The teenager stuffed his hands deeper into his hoodie pockets, glancing around. Alright, seriously, where are we going? Keanu pointed across the street to a small coffee shop nestled between two larger buildings. Its sign was faded, and the windows were foggy with steam. The kid frowned. A coffee shop? That's your big plan? Trust me, Keanu said simply. They crossed the street and stepped inside. The place was warm and cozy, the air thick with the smell of freshly brewed coffee. A few patrons sat at scattered tables, sipping from mugs and typing on laptops. Behind the counter, an older woman with kind eyes smiled when she saw Keanu. Well, I'll be. Look who decided to drop by, she said, wiping her hands on a towel. It's always good to see you. Keanu smiled warmly. Hi, Maria. How's business? She waved a hand dismissively. Same old, same old. But I can't complain. Her eyes flickered to the teenager. Who's your friend? The kid opened his mouth, but Keanu beat him to it. This is someone who's about to learn a thing or two. Maria arched an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. Well, you brought him to the right place. Go on, sit down. I'll bring you both some coffee. They settled into a booth by the window. The teenager slouched in his seat, his bravado starting to fade. So, you come here a lot or something? He asked. Keanu nodded. Whenever I can. Maria's coffee is the best in the city. The teenager glanced around skeptically. Looks kinda run down. Looks can be deceiving, Keanu said simply. Maria returned with 2 steaming mugs and set them down with a smile. On the house for you, Keanu. But your friend better tip me big someday. The teenager managed a sheepish grin. Sure, yeah. As Maria walked away, Keanu took a sip of his coffee, his expression thoughtful. You ever think about why people do what they do? He asked suddenly. The kid blinked. What do you mean? Why you mocked me on the subway, for example. The question caught the teenager off guard. He fumbled for an answer. I dunno. It was just funny, I guess. Keanu's gaze was steady. Was it? The kid squirmed. Okay, maybe not funny exactly. But, like, you looked all serious and out of place. I thought you were trying to be cool or something. Keanu nodded slowly. And that made you want to bring me down a notch? The teenager stared into his coffee, the weight of the conversation starting to settle over him. I guess I never really thought about it like that. Keanu leaned back in his seat. Most people don't. It's easy to judge someone based on a single moment. But you never know what someone's going through. The kid frowned. Wait, are you saying you're going through something? I thought you had, like, the perfect life. Keanu's smile was faint, but there was a hint of sadness in it. Nobody's life is perfect. Not yours, not mine. Everyone has their own struggles. The teenager went quiet, mulling over Keanu's words. For the first time, his cocky exterior was starting to crack. You ever think about how your words affect people? Keanu asked. The kid hesitated. I mean, not really. It's just stuff I say, you know? Like jokes. Keanu's voice was gentle but firm. Words have power. They can lift someone up or tear them down. You may not think you hurt anyone, but you don't know what someone's carrying inside. The teenager swallowed hard. Yeah. I guess I never thought of it like that. Maria's voice called from behind the counter. Keanu, you're gonna stick around for the open mic tonight? Keanu grinned. Wouldn't miss it. The teenager's eyes widened. Wait, you do open mic here? Keanu chuckled. Not exactly. But I like to listen. You never know when you'll hear something inspiring. The kid shook his head, still trying to wrap his mind around this strange turn of events. Man, you're really not what I expected. Keanu's gaze was steady. Maybe that's the point. As they finished their coffee, the teenager had a feeling that this was only the beginning of something unexpected, and maybe even life-changing. The coffee shop started filling up as the open mic event drew closer. A few musicians tuned their guitars in the corner, and a nervous-looking poet paced near the stage, mumbling lines to himself. The cozy buzz of conversation filled the room, but at the booth by the window, the teenager's thoughts were far from the lively atmosphere. He still couldn't figure Keanu out. Who does that? Gets mocked on the subway and then invites the loudmouth kid to coffee like it's no big deal. Was this some weird celebrity stunt? A publicity trick to look down to earth? But Keanu didn't have cameras following him or anyone posting about the encounter. If anything, he seemed genuinely normal. Too normal, honestly. So what now? The teenager finally asked, breaking the silence. Keanu glanced at him, calm as ever. You tell me. The kid scoffed. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. Is this the part where I have some big epiphany and change my whole life? Keanu's eyes twinkled with amusement. Not necessarily. But maybe you'll see things a little differently. The teenager was about to retort when the door jingled, and a disheveled man in his late 50s walked in. His coat was fraying at the edges, and his boots were caked in dried mud. He carried a beat-up guitar case with stickers peeling off the sides. Maria's face lit up. "David. Haven't seen you in a while." "Been out of town," the man said gruffly, though his eyes softened at her warm welcome. He glanced around, spotted Keanu, and his face broke into a surprised grin. "Well, I'll be damned. Keanu, that you?" Keanu stood up and extended a hand. "Hey, David. Good to see you." They shook hands like old friends, and David's gaze shifted to the teenager. "Who's this?" "Someone learning a few lessons today," Keanu said cryptically. David chuckled. "Aren't we all?" He gestured toward a table near the stage. "Mind if I join you?" "Of course," Keanu said. They moved to the larger table, and David set his guitar case down with a sigh. "Been playing any gigs lately?" Keanu asked. "Not as many as I'd like," David admitted. "But you know how it is. You keep going." The teenager frowned, curiosity piqued. "Wait, are you, like, famous too or something?" David let out a hearty laugh. "Nah, kid. Just a guy who loves music. Used to play some decent venues back in the day, but life had other plans." The teenager raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" David's expression grew serious. "Lost my job during the recession. One bad turn after another, and before I knew it, I was couch surfing with my guitar as my only possession." He tapped the case fondly. "But this old girl kept me going." The kid shifted uncomfortably. "That sucks." David shrugged. "It's life. You adapt or you break." Keanu spoke up, his voice steady. David didn't let it break him. "And he's one of the most generous people I know." David waved a dismissive hand. "Ah, don't listen to this guy. He's always making me sound like a saint." Maria returned with a plate of pastries, setting them down in front of David. "On the house," she said with a wink. "You deserve it." "Thanks, Maria. You're a gem." David took a bite, his expression turning blissful. "Man, I missed this place." The teenager watched the exchange in silence. There was something about the way these people interacted, like they were part of some secret club where kindness and humility were the currency. "Do you know everyone?" the kid asked Keanu, half joking. "Not everyone," Keanu said with a smile. "But I like meeting people. You never know who might teach you something." David nodded in agreement. "Ain't that the truth?" Speaking of which, he turned to the teenager. "What's your story, kid?" The teenager blinked. I don't really have one." "Sure you do," David said. "Everyone does. Just gotta figure out what chapter you're in." Keanu leaned forward, his gaze thoughtful. "What do you want your story to be?" The teenager hesitated. No one had ever asked him that before. His life had always been about going through the motions, school, hanging out with friends, cracking jokes to look cool. He'd never really thought about what came next. "I dunno," he admitted. "I never really thought about it." David smiled. "Well, you're in the right place. Coffee shops are where all the big thinkers hang out." Maria overheard and laughed. "Ain't that the truth? I swear half my customers are plotting world domination." The mood lightened, and for the first time since getting off the subway, the teenager felt comfortable. Like maybe this wasn't such a weird detour after all. As the open mic started, David was called to the stage. He grabbed his guitar, gave them a nod, and made his way up front. "Break a leg," Keanu called. David grinned. Always. The first few chords filled the room, rich and soulful. The crowd quieted, captivated by the raw honesty of his music. Even the teenager, who usually thought acoustic stuff was boring, found himself leaning forward. David's voice was weathered but powerful, carrying the weight of every struggle and triumph he'd faced. The lyrics spoke of resilience, hope, and finding beauty in the messiness of life. When he finished, the room erupted into applause. David bowed modestly and made his way back to the table. "Not bad, old man," the teenager said, trying to sound nonchalant. David chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment." As the applause died down, Keanu turned to the teenager. "There's one more place I want to take you." The kid's brows furrowed. "Seriously? What is this, a field trip?" Keanu's smile was enigmatic. "Something like that." Despite his initial resistance, the teenager found himself curious. There was something about Keanu's calm confidence that made it impossible to say no. "Fine," he said. "But this better be worth it." Keanu stood, tossing some cash on the table. "It will be." As they stepped outside, the cool night air hit them. The teenager pulled his hoodie tighter, wondering what strange twist awaited him next. The city was alive with its usual nighttime rhythm, streetlights flickering, cars honking, and groups of people laughing as they made their way to bars and restaurants. The teenager walked beside Keanu, his hands shoved deep in his hoodie pockets. "So where are we going now?" he asked, trying to sound indifferent but failing to hide his curiosity. "You'll see," Keanu said, his tone calm as ever. They crossed a few streets, heading away from the bustling city center and into a quieter, older part of town. The buildings here were worn and graffiti-covered, their windows dark. The teenager's steps slowed as unease crept in. Dude? This doesn't exactly look like a tourist spot." Keanu kept walking. "Not everything worth seeing is shiny." The teenager rolled his eyes. "Wow, deep." They turned a corner, and that's when the teenager saw it, a line of people stretched down the block, huddled together in coats and blankets. Some sat on the ground, their faces weary and weathered. Others leaned against the walls, talking quietly or simply staring into space. "What is this?" the teenager asked, his voice low. "A shelter," Keanu said. "They're waiting for a warm meal and a place to sleep." The teenager's stomach twisted. He'd never seen anything like this up close. Sure, he knew homelessness was a thing, but it was always something distant, a headline on the news or a quick glance out of a car window. Now it was right in front of him. Keanu walked up to a volunteer near the entrance, a young woman with a clipboard. "Hey, Jenna." Her face lit up when she saw him. "Keanu. It's been a while." "I brought someone with me tonight," Keanu said, nodding toward the teenager. "Thought he might want to see what kindness looks like." Jenna's smile was warm. "We can always use more hands. Come on in." The teenager hesitated. "Wait, are we volunteering?" Keanu shrugged. "Unless you have somewhere better to be." The kid glanced at the line of people, their faces etched with exhaustion and hope. His instincts told him to bolt, but something about Keanu's steady presence kept him rooted in place. "Fine," he muttered. "But I'm not wearing one of those dorky hairnets." Jenna laughed. "No hairnets tonight. Just aprons." Inside the shelter, the atmosphere was surprisingly warm and lively. Volunteers bustled around, setting up tables and serving steaming plates of food. The smell of roasted chicken and fresh bread filled the air. Jenna handed them each an apron. Keanu tied his on effortlessly, while the teenager fumbled with his. "Need help?" Keanu offered. "I got it," the kid grumbled, managing to tie a lopsided knot. They were assigned to the serving line, where the teenager was handed a ladle. His job was simple: scoop mashed potatoes onto plates and pass them down the line. At first, he felt awkward, like he didn't belong. But as people came through the line, thanking him with tired but genuine smiles, something inside him shifted. Each "thank you" chipped away at his discomfort. A man with graying hair and a weathered face approached. "Appreciate it, kid," he said softly. The teenager managed a nod. Yeah. You're welcome." Keanu, standing beside him, quietly served chicken onto plates. His movements were smooth and practiced, like he'd done this 100 times before. "You do this a lot?" the teenager asked under his breath. "As much as I can," Keanu replied. The kid frowned. "Why? You're rich. You don't have to be here." Keanu's gaze was thoughtful. "That's exactly why I should be here." The teenager opened his mouth to respond, but a voice interrupted. "Keanu. Is that you?" They both looked up to see a man in his 40s with a scruffy beard and a wide grin. His clothes were clean but frayed, and there was a spark of recognition in his eyes. Keanu's face lit up. "Tommy. How've you been?" The two shook hands warmly. "Better now," Tommy said. "Finally got a job and a place to stay. Just came by to say thanks." The teenager watched the exchange, bewildered. "Wait, you know this guy?" Keanu nodded. "Tommy was here last year. We talked a lot." Tommy's eyes softened. "This man right here? He gave me hope when I didn't have any left. Told me I wasn't just some statistic. That I mattered." Keanu's voice was humble. "You did the hard part, Tommy. I just reminded you of what you already knew." Tommy clapped him on the shoulder. "Don't sell yourself short, man. People like you make a difference." As Tommy walked away, the teenager stared at Keanu. "Seriously, who are you?" Keanu smiled faintly. "Just a guy trying to do some good." The line of guests dwindled, and Jenna called for a break. The teenager and Keanu sat at a table, the kid's mind racing with everything he'd seen and heard. "I didn't know people could end up like that so fast," the teenager admitted quietly. "It can happen to anyone," Keanu said. "One bad break, one unexpected expense, and suddenly your whole life changes." The kid swallowed hard. "I never really thought about it. Guess I've been kind of, I don't know, selfish?" Keanu's gaze was kind. "It's not about blaming yourself. It's about what you do next." Silence hung between them for a moment. "Hey," the teenager said, his voice tentative. "Thanks for, I don't know, bringing me here, I guess." Keanu smiled. "Anytime." As they stood up to help with cleanup, the teenager felt something unfamiliar stirring inside him, a sense of purpose, small but growing. And for the first time in a long time, he wanted to be better. After the dinner rush cleared and the tables were wiped down, the shelter grew quieter. Volunteers gathered in small groups, chatting and sipping coffee. Some guests lingered, enjoying the rare warmth and comfort. Keanu and the teenager stood near the entrance, their aprons crumpled in their hands. "Ready to head out?" Keanu asked. The kid nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Yeah." They handed their aprons back to Jenna, who smiled warmly. "You did good tonight, both of you. Thanks for helping out." The teenager scratched the back of his neck, feeling awkward. Yeah. No problem." As they stepped outside, the cool night air wrapped around them. The streets were quieter now, illuminated by the soft glow of streetlights. For a few moments, they walked in silence, the city humming faintly around them. "You hungry?" Keanu asked suddenly. The teenager blinked. "After serving all that food?" "Nah, I'm good." Keanu grinned. "Fair enough. They passed a park where a few people sat on benches, bundled up against the cold. The teenager's gaze lingered on them, his earlier indifference replaced by a newfound awareness. "So, do you do this every week or something?" he asked. Keanu's voice was thoughtful. "Not every week, but as often as I can. It's a reminder." "Of what?" Keanu looked up at the night sky. "Of what really matters." The teenager frowned. "Yeah, but you're, like, Keanu Reeves. You could be at some fancy party or flying to Paris or whatever famous people do." Keanu's smile was faint. "And miss out on this?" He gestured back toward the shelter. "There's something real about connecting with people, hearing their stories, and being reminded that we're all in this together." The kid stuffed his hands into his hoodie pockets. "You're weird, man. I'll take that as a compliment." They continued walking until they reached a quiet street corner. Keanu stopped and turned to face the teenager. "You've got a choice to make," Keanu said. The kid frowned. "What do you mean?" "You can go back to your friends tomorrow, tell them this was all some weird celebrity encounter, and keep doing what you've always done. Or you can take what you've seen tonight and do something with it." The teenager's heart thudded in his chest. "Like what?" Keanu's gaze was steady. "Be kind. Stand up for people when it matters. Use your words to lift people up instead of tearing them down. It doesn't have to be big, just real." The kid swallowed hard, Keanu's words settling deep in his chest. "I don't know if I can change overnight." "Good," Keanu said. "Change isn't supposed to be easy or fast. But if you're willing to try, that's a start." They stood there for a moment, the weight of the conversation hanging in the air. "So, is this the part where we hug or something?" the teenager joked, trying to lighten the mood. Keanu laughed softly. "Only if you want to." The kid shook his head, grinning despite himself. "Nah, I'm good." Keanu extended a hand instead. "Take care of yourself." The teenager hesitated, then gripped Keanu's hand firmly. "You too." As Keanu turned to walk away, the teenager's voice stopped him. "Hey, Keanu?" He paused, glancing back. "Yeah?" The kid took a breath. "Thanks, for everything." Keanu's smile was genuine. "Anytime." And with that, he disappeared down the street, blending seamlessly into the city like any other passerby. The next morning, the teenager found himself back on the subway, the familiar rhythm of the train lulling the passengers into their usual morning days. He sat near the door, his hoodie pulled up, lost in thought. At the next stop, an older man struggled to board the train, his arms full of grocery bags. The teenager noticed that no one was moving to help, eyes glued to phones, earbuds firmly in place. Without thinking, he stood up. "Here, let me help you," he said, grabbing two of the bags. The man's face lit up with surprise. "Oh, thank you, young man. That's very kind of you." "No problem," the teenager said, feeling an unexpected warmth in his chest. As he sat back down, he pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket, the note Keanu had handed him the night before. The words were simple but heavy with meaning. "Judging someone doesn't define them. It defines you." The teenager stared at the note for a long moment. And this time, he understood. A small smile tugged at his lips as the train rumbled toward its next stop. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was headed in the right direction.